WJFF in Liberty, this is Radio Chatskill. I'm Patricia Bio, filling in for Tim Bruno. On today's show, a podcast devoted to the history of Woodstock called Keep the Dream Flowing, with memories from the artists and crew of Woodstock and the members of the Woodstock Nation who came to share in 3 days of peace, love, and music. The Wayne County Fair is a summer tradition, and Farm & Country's Rosie Starr visits the fair, capturing the scene where the farm meets food and fun. And we'll check in with Tim Bruno live from the Barryville's Farmers Market and see what he has cooking. And it's Pride Time on Radio Chatskill. We'll check in with Dale Belgrove on monkeypox and LPG Team Talk. But first, the news from NPR. This is Radio Chatskill. I'm Patricia Robayo. It's the 53rd anniversary of the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, commonly referred to as Woodstock. The music festival was held on August 15th to the 18th in 1969, and the music festival was held here on Max Yeager's Dairy Farm Rush, just down the road from us. Now there's a podcast devoted to the history of Woodstock called Keep the Dream Flowing, with memories from the artists and crew of Woodstock and the members of the Woodstock Nation who came to share in 3 days of peace, love, and music. Radio Chatskill's Aaron Sharon has more.
If you look at pictures of Michael Lang at Woodstock, very often he is accompanied by lovely young lady who's your classic hippie chick. She's got the hat and she's got, the clothes and all that stuff. And she's in a lot of pictures with him. You'll see the same girl. That was Tish Agri, who was Michael Lang's assistant.
She was his assistant.
Yes. Yeah. And so she's in a lot of that was his assistant, right? And so I was talking with her about she's actually a good friend, and I was talking with her about names for the show, and she came up with Keep the Dream Flowing. So that was her title. And because she's Tisha and because we worship the ground she walks on, that's the title of the show.
That's Scott Parker and Jack Lokensky talking about the origin story of the title of their podcast, Keep the Dream Flowing. The first thing that comes to mind for many when it comes to the 1969 Woodstock Festival held in Bethel are the performers who headlined the festival: Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the Jefferson Airplane, The Who, the Grateful Dead, Sly and the Family Stone, Santana, Country Joe and the Fish, and the list goes on. Still, there were 500,000 people who attended the festival, and those who have survived still have stories to tell. Like Mick Valenti, whose band Quarry played Woodstock's Free Stage, or Jeannie Whitworth, the teenage runaway who found her way into Life magazine when she was photographed at the festival holding a wine bottle. Or how about Suzanne Bunn, the nun who flashed the peace sign at the camera in the Woodstock documentary? You can hear their stories and more on the podcast Keep the Dream Flowing, the first and so far only podcast devoted entirely to the 1969 Woodstock Festival. Since 2019, Scott Parker, Jack Lokensky, and Johnny Hudson have produced over 80 episodes speaking with musicians who played the festival, as well as other concert goers and those adjacent, like current Woodridge Deputy Mayor Leni Binder, talking about her experiences with making sandwiches for the festival goers.
I said there was only one store open then. It was called the Giant Market. It was a Pennsylvania firm. They were open 2 evenings a week and on weekends. And it was right near the Grossinger's exit, what's now exit 100 in Liberty.
Yeah, right.
So I put my son in the car. We went up there. And I went in there, and I had pretty much figured the only thing you could make that wouldn't spoil would be peanut butter and jelly. So I went into the store, and I took a couple of breads, and I got some peanut butter and jelly. And as I was walking by, I said, I better make some extra sandwiches in case they get stuck. So I went by, and I took 2 more loaves of bread, and I said, oh, well, we'll take what they have.
Yeah.
So it must have been about 10, 12 loaves of bread. I went back to the peanut butter, and I think it was their generic brand. And I remember debating about the jelly because I didn't like grape jelly. And I go, what am I worried about? So I bought jelly and I bought wax paper. I think I bought foil to fold the sandwiches. And I don't know, and no one's verified this. I do know if all the people who tell me they had a sandwich, I would have made about 200,000 sandwiches. I did not.
You know, there's been a lot of books that have been written about Woodstock. And, you know, I mean, I wrote one. There's a lot of people that have had a lot to say. But generally speaking, when you read these books, it's not always true, but typically you'll hear a lot of the same names. So you'll see Michael Lang, Artie Kornfeld, and John Roberts, Joe Roseman. Those were the four partners that put Woodstock together. A lot of the marquee musicians, Carlos Santana, people of that, Joan Baez, people of that sort.
Richie Havens, Melanie.
Yep.
They've all
Arlo
you've seen
Guthrie.
them interviewed. They've all told their Woodstock stories.
Yeah. And, you know, if you take, just take, for example, Arlo Guthrie, who's been interviewed 1 million times about Woodstock. He had a band with him. And I found it fascinating to find the people, for example, find the people who were in his band or in all of these bands and get their stories as well, because sometimes they contradict the stories that the band leaders have been telling for 50 plus years. But it's really interesting to have their voices because those voices are not documented. So it's just about, you know, for me, it's about documentation. I'm sure Jack and Johnny feel the same way because sometimes we do interview, you know, like I said, you know, we did have Artie Kornfeld on the show. We had Wavy Gravy. There's been people like that, but there's so many stories. And that includes the people in the crowd who have been underrepresented in terms of getting their stories archived, I guess. And it's kind of the way I look at it is sort of for future generations of historians, because I think this is an event that's going to continue to fascinate people. It's weird the way that Woodstock affects people who were never there. I mean, I certainly was never there. I wasn't born yet.
But these people that I don't want to call them the little people because that's not the right way. The people that are not famous per se, but their stories are remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But their stories, like you talk to a guy that came from, you know, Hackensack, New Jersey, or somebody that came from Wyoming, hypothetically. We haven't talked to anybody from there, and they tell you their adventure, how they got there and what they saw, and they tell you little stories that you're like, man, that's interesting. And that's another reason we like doing this or love doing this, because you hear stories that aren't commonplace. You know, everybody knows people got high at Woodstock, but they tell stories that you're like, man, we never even, that would never even occur to us. Like you said, everyone knows that the most common names were at Woodstock, but like we've interviewed people who have a story who weren't, you know, that like, for example, in the movie, there's a guy, those that have seen the movie, he's 6'9", and he comes out of the Porta-John with a pipe, and he didn't have Borkham Riff pipe tobacco in it, if you catch my drift. And that's an iconic scene in the movie. His name is Wayne Rogers. I mean, that was a wonderful guy to interview. If you've seen the movie, you know the guy, but no one would think in a million years, you know, this guy's still on the planet, and he is.
Scott Parker lives in Connecticut. He's published many books, including several volumes about Frank Zappa's work, and a book called Woodstock Documented, a book focusing on the audio and visual aspects of Woodstock. More recently, he's also been working as a project manager for Gerald Abramson's Yasgur Road Productions. Jack Lokensky grew up in Brooklyn and currently lives in Rockland County. Johnny Hudson lives in Atlanta. The three of them found each other while on a quest to collect every Woodstock audio and video recording available, as well as Juma Sultan, a musician who played with Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock. Since 2011, Parker has hosted Zappacast, the official podcast from Frank Zappa's estate. 3 years ago, to coincide with the festival's 50th anniversary, he decided to launch a podcast devoted to telling some of the lesser-known stories of Woodstock. He also had another motive: Jack Lokensky.
Gerald Abramson and the late Roy Howard bought Max Yasgur's actual farmhouse.
Yes.
And they started, before Bethel Woods, they started having an anniversary. You know, I don't know Roy's whole story, and we haven't really gotten into Gerald's whole story, how they got into Woodstock. But for whatever reason, they decided to buy the house. And then because they had the house, they decided to commemorate the anniversary of the Woodstock Festival by having bands play at his house.
Yep. And
Scott has been part of that for a number of years. I don't know how long.
9 years now. Yeah.
Okay. But part of doing another impetus for doing the podcast was to promote Gerald's show at her house at the anniversary weekend. And that's why she was the first guest.
Jack Lokensky joined Scott during the 6th episode, and completing the trio, Johnny Hudson joined in the 10th episode.
And then when Scott decided to start the podcast, we got Johnny as a guest. Well, I asked Scott if I could assist him in any way, shape, or form. And he said, how about being a co-host? Which I wasn't expecting. But I'm glad that he asked that, because I like it, and I think I'm fairly good at it, but that's to be determined.
I can't do this all by myself, Jack.
So Scott and I started booking guests. One of the guests we booked was Johnny, and then he said, I wanted in, and that's how the Holy Trinity came to be.
Most of their guests are relative unknowns, but higher profile people do drop in every once in a while. Like Wavy Gravy, the festival's MC, Jonathan Taplin, the band's road manager turned Martin Scorsese's producer, former Today Show correspondent Rona Elliott, who also worked as a community liaison during the original festival, and Artie Kornfeld, the festival's co-founder.
It took over a year to get Mr. Taplin. I mean, it wasn't that he was just too busy. He had a book, his new book came out. We plugged it on the show. It's a fabulous book. And he said,
available at Amazon and at your local bookstore.
Yes, we highly recommend it. And finally, I was able to get him on the show. Wavy was very simple. I looked up, his real name, and I found it, and I called. That was it's not always that simple. Sometimes, you have, like I said, you have to find a name. A couple of times people have written articles, people that are journalists, and I'll email them, and I'll say, so-and-so, you did an article on him 5 years ago, and thinking, I don't have to give a chance with this. And they'll say, okay, well, here's his email address, or I'll forward your email to him. So, but some of like Carlos Santana, we want to get him, but, that's a big fish, so to speak. But, obviously we want to get everyone. You look at people.
But success breeds success. And as we grow, we are getting bigger marquee names. Like when we started this, I never would have dreamed of talking to John Morris.
Yeah,
and we did. And, Rona Elliott, and, we had met Artie Kornfeld, and Artie Kornfeld knows me. He's called me. Johnny's good friends with him. And it's like, okay. So you leverage the friendship, but every time you get a name on, we had so-and-so on, listen to that episode, so-and-so can listen to the episodes, and then it keeps building. And, it's kind of like, they know you're in the club if you talk to so-and-so.
To bring things full circle, Scott, Jack, and Johnny donate their interviews to the Bethel Woods Museum.
I've actually been sort of associated with them, donating bits of audio and video since before they opened. So I have this sort of ongoing affiliation with them. I never have to pay to get into the museum. So, but yeah, no, it's given me a lot of great things to have that association. But one of the things that I feel most blessed to be able to do is when we do these episodes, we can donate the raw interviews for them, because I think their mission is extremely important. And eventually somebody's going to go through these, I don't know how many hours of interviews it is now, and be able to craft a kind of alternative oral history of Woodstock that would be absolutely riveting. I don't know if we are the people who can do that. All we can really do are the interviews.
While Scott, Jack, and Johnny like to keep the names of future guests under wraps, they did let me in on some potential appearances.
We have several that are coming up. Harry Loco is the artist from Belgium who plays over at Gerald's every year and also at Hector's. And I don't know that there is an American artist that embodies the spirit of Woodstock or takes it as seriously as Harry does. I mean, he really, he lives in the light, you might say. And this is without the benefit of LSD. Go figure. So
I've gotten a approval to get some people that are closely associated with Sly and the Family Stone fans and a couple other musicians to we could start like some type of, I guess, Sly and the Family Stone Chronicles, for lack of a better way of describing it. We could have a series of interviews. Now, I don't think we're going to get Sly Stone. I don't think we can afford that.
No.
But we will have a lot of talks. I'm not sure when that's going to occur, but hopefully it'll be in the next, few months. But that'll take some work.
And of course, there's more to come on the Quarry story.
Keep the Dream Flowing can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Audible, and Google Podcasts. I'm Erin Shear. This has been a production of Radio Chatskill.
We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll hang out with Farm and Country's Rosie Starr at the Wayne County Fair. We'll be right back. This is Radio Chatskill.